There was a boy who had no home to live in, no food to eat, whose father's business failed, and who drowned in debt leading to his father's death. Later, this same boy went on to create the world's most expensive car, with even kings and emperors lining up to buy it. At just 4 years old, this boy had to work in fields to feed himself, and his mother separated him, saying she could not keep him because she had no money and was drowning in debt. This boy neither attended school nor went to college, yet he went on to build engines for complex machinery and astonished the entire world. We are talking about Sir Henry Royce, who started Rolls-Royce in 1904 with just £2,000. Today, the market value of this company exceeds 4 lakh crore rupees, and even today, a single car from this company is worth over 200 crore rupees. With that amount, we could buy 50 sparkling Lamborghinis. Despite never having any formal education, he went on to create airplane engines and revolutionized the car industry. But what was the genius partnership that changed not just Rolls-Royce, but the entire future of the automotive industry? Henry was born on March 27, 1863, in a small village as the youngest of 5 siblings. Henry's father, James, ran a small flour mill that he had leased, but he lacked the business acumen, resulting in continuous losses. By 1867, when Henry was just 4 years old, his father went bankrupt and had to shut down the mill. The family moved to London in search of work. In London, the family's condition worsened. They were heavily in debt and had to start working at a very young age. At the age of 4, Henry was pulled out of school and sent to work for a wealthy neighbor, scaring away birds in the fields for which he earned just a few pennies. Sometimes, Henry and his siblings had to go to bed hungry. After a few years, things started to improve slowly, but then in 1872, when Henry was just 9, his father James passed away. Henry wanted to go back to school but had no option. At 9 years old, Henry had to find work again, delivering newspapers and letters to support his family. Many times, he didn't have enough to eat, becoming so weak that he looked like a skeleton and suffered from various illnesses. The family's situation did not improve, and Henry's mother, Mary, was still heavily in debt. Raising Henry and his siblings was very difficult for her, so Mary made a heart-wrenching decision. She told Henry, "I can no longer keep you with me. I am heavily in debt and have to part with you." Henry was shocked, but Mary sent him to live with an elderly couple who wanted to take in children like him. However, this elderly couple also had very little money, and Henry lived on only milk and bread for years. Henry knew he had to get out of this situation. In 1878, at the age of 13, he went to his aunt and borrowed some money to start training at the Great Northern Railway Works. Still, Henry had no home to stay in, so he returned to his aunt and asked if he could live with her. His aunt replied that she had already given him a lot of money and could no longer afford to keep him. Soon after, he met a man named George, whose son, Havelock, was also training with Henry. George suggested that Henry move into his home, which had a workshop where Henry could continue his training. Henry worked during the day and learned about new engines and the Great Northern Railway Works. With George at night, everything seemed to be going well until Henry faced another problem. By the 3rd year of his training, all the money his aunt had given him was exhausted. He sought help from many people but received none, so he had to stop his training at the railway works. At 17, Henry got a job at the Electric Light and Power Company, where he earned just £1 a week. Despite this, Henry was focused on learning new things. Whenever he had time, he would take books on math, French, and engineering and study them. He was so dedicated that he often worked through meals and spent his earnings on engineering classes to learn more. His dedication impressed his boss, who decided to send Henry to the Liverpool office as a chief engineer. 2 years later, in 1884, Henry called his colleague and friend Claremont and asked how much savings he had. Claremont had just £5,000, so they started a company called H. Royce and Company in Manchester, which made engineering tools. They rented a small shop with a tiny room above it where they lived. They invested all their savings into this business and initially lived on sandwiches heated on an old stove. Henry was very hardworking, and within a few months, he made an electric doorbell that became very popular in the market. With some money coming in, Henry decided to build bigger things. After the doorbell, he created an electric generator. By 1894, just 14 years after starting with £2,000, Henry was running a business worth £2 million annually, and their company had amassed £1 million. Henry became wealthy but aimed higher. By this time, the first petrol-powered cars were on the market, and Henry's engineering mind was very interested. In 1901, Henry bought his first car, the daredevil, but it didn't start. Next day, Henry began repairing it. He didn't like the car's design, so he took it apart and rebuilt it, upgrading the engine, but it still didn't meet his expectations. Henry decided it was better to build his own car that would be the best in the world. When he shared this idea with his colleagues, they laughed, telling him to stick to his successful business instead of venturing into car manufacturing. Henry was undeterred. His new goal was to build cars. Henry's first target was to create his own car engine. Just 2 years later, in 1903, Henry made his own petrol engine, astonishing people who wondered how someone with no formal education could surpass established engineers. A year after making the engine, in 1904, Henry built his own car, which was better than any on the market at that time, and named it the Royce 10. He made 3 models of the Royce 10, one for himself, one for his partner Claremont, and one sold to a businessman, Henry Edmunds. Edmunds liked the car so much that he showed it to his friend Charles Rolls, who wanted to meet Henry immediately. This meeting became one of the most important in automotive history. Charles Rolls' story was the complete opposite of Henry's. Born into one of the richest families, Rolls studied mechanical engineering at Trinity College and had a great interest in cars. At 18, he bought a Fitton car from France and was one of the best car buyers in England. In 1903, he started his own car dealership, C. Rolls and Company. The meeting between Henry and Rolls on March 4, 1904, was highly anticipated. Despite their contrasting backgrounds, Henry from poverty and Charles from wealth, their partnership proved fruitful. Charles tested Henry's car and liked it so much that he wanted to buy all the cars Henry could make and sell them. Charles went back to London and enthusiastically told his best friend about Henry, who was a brilliant motor engineer. Finally, in 1906, the two partners started Rolls-Royce Limited. The Royce 10 quickly gained fame, and with Charles's financial and business skills combined with Henry's engineering expertise, they launched the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost in 1906. Henry and Charles put the world's most powerful and stable engine in this car, and to prove its stability, they placed a glass of water on the engine and drove it at high speed. When they stopped, not a drop of water had spilled, making it the best car in the world. In 1907, the Silver Ghost won many awards for its design and reliability, and even kings and emperors began to line up to buy it. Despite the success, Henry was not satisfied and always pushed for perfection. Even with significant achievements, he continued working. Tragedy struck Henry's life. His partner, Charles Rolls, had a great passion for airplanes and had even purchased a plane, which he had flown over 200 times. Charles became the first Englishman to cross the English Channel by plane in 1910. He suggested that Henry make airplane engines, but Henry hesitated. In 1910, Charles tragically died in a plane crash. Despite this immense loss, Henry continued his work, adhering to his principles of dedication and perfection. In 1915, during World War I, he developed the Rolls-Royce Eagle engine, one of the best aircraft engines of its time, which never failed in tests or operations. In 1928, he created the R engine, which set a world record for speed at 655 kilometers per hour. Henry continued to work relentlessly, but began to suffer from poor health. In the early 1930s, he built the legendary Merlin engine. Just a few months later, in 1933, Henry passed away, but until his last moments, he was dedicated to his work, even sketching. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this.